All right, let's get to it.
Most important position on the team, but it's not more important than the rest of the positions combined. There is so much outside of a quarterback's control that goes into how often they win games, and when it comes to Tom Brady, people seem to forget this. And this is my first reason why Tom Brady is the most overrated player of all time. People use team stats to prop up Brady as an individual. Despite my hatred for Tom Brady, I'm not stupid enough to pretend that he hasn't had something to do with the Patriots' success since 2001.
You hear what he said? Because of my hatred for Tom Brady, I'm not going to pretend like he had something to do with the success. Although he seems like he's acknowledging that, it's super dismissive. Like, I mean, a broke clock is right twice a day. That type of thing is super dismissive to a guy who, before he got there, that team went to 2 Super Bowls, won none. Has had no team success, like long-term team success, before he got there. No long-term success. But apparently, it's not him that's the reason why the team is winning. I told you before, that team went 5-11 before he became the starter. 5-11 with Drew Bledsoe, who was looked at as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL around that time. 5-11. With pretty much the same team. And the next year when he becomes the starter after Bledsoe went down, 11-5, and they went on to the Super Bowl. Oh man, but what about the tuck rule? That is not the first time that a rule has been just thrown out there that nobody has heard of in a long time, but apparently it happens. To be honest, that's not the first time a rule has been incredibly misplaced. Like when you look at the offensive pass the defensive pass interferences, over the past few years or whatever that has happened, like the New Orleans thing where Taquan, what's his name? Taquan Smith, the wide receiver for the Saints, was pretty much ran over. Like he was ran into by Nickel Roby-Coleman. Like he was just ran into. That was defensive pass interference, but they called nothing. But this is the first time the refs have been unpopular in their decisions. Okay, but let's not act like the rule has not benefited other teams as well. Sometimes, your team is looking for that big play, that big touchdown. The quarterback drops back. He looks to pass. He's looking to pass it to somebody. The ball gets knocked out. Everybody thinks it's a fumble at first until they go back and look at the replay. Oh, the quarterback's arm was moving forward. So it was an incomplete pass. That rule has saved so many quarterbacks since it has been called. So let's not act like it only benefited the Patriots. Okay? And even after that, man, you still had to go through Pittsburgh, who was, I think, the best team in the NFL at that time. Well, not the best team in the NFL. They were the best team in the AFC because the Rams around that time were the best team. But they were the best team in the AFC. It was considered an upset when the Patriots went there to beat them at Heinz Field. It was an upset. So the Patriots still had to win. Now, in that game, Bledsoe did play because Brady, I believe, was hurt. So Bledsoe did play. But then you go on and you play the best team in the NFL. And who played that game? Who pulled out one of the most ballsiest, gutsiest, last-minute drives that the Patriots was able to pull off? And then subsequently, he would go on to lead 2 more game-winning drives in 2 other Super Bowls, back-to-back. Brady has put that team in position to win so many times. And then people want to say, well, Adam Vinatieri is really the one that won those Super Bowls. The kicking. Yeah, well, the offense has to move the ball. Okay? The offense has to move the ball.
He's a pretty smart player, and he's been incredibly durable outside of American hero Bernard Pollard shredding his knee in week 1.
American hero. The hate is just permeating. Bernard Pollard is one of the most disgusting human beings in the world. Because the ill intent that he goes after players. And you can just tell that the league doesn't give a shit about New England because they did not like suspend this dude indefinitely for the shit that he has even come out after the games that he has injured New England players and said that it was his intention to do so. Bernard Pollard is one of the most disgusting human beings in the sport of football I've ever seen. The shit Ndamukong Suh was doing wasn't as disgusting as what this guy, because he intentionally went after what's his name, Wes Welker. He intentionally injured Rob Gronkowski right before the Super Bowl. I believe it was the Super Bowl against the Giants. I believe he pretty much shredded his ankle. I believe not shredded. He fucked his ankle up because he landed on it, and he did a lot of this shit intentionally. That's why they called him the Patriot Killer, because he was out there to hurt them intentionally. But he's a hero to this guy, you know.
Of the 2008 season, and that 2008 season presented one of the biggest reasons why Tom Brady is overrated.
You're talking about an 11-5 record. Matt Castle was the beneficiary of a 16-0 team, and even still, they didn't make the playoffs. So what is your argument? Where is the context that your shit is built on? It's not built on anything. You're building it on numbers, and without context, the numbers can be misleading. Matt Castle was the beneficiary of a 16-0 team that had Randy Moss. I believe Ben Watson was still the tight end there. Wes Welker, Lawrence Maroney. That defense was still good. Like, come on, man. Like, they built that team before Matt Castle took over. That team was already established. All he had to do was come in and not fuck up. That was his job, to come in and not make mistakes. They still didn't make the playoffs. And I'm telling you, if Brady played that season, most likely they would have won 14 games and they would have won that division.
Patriots won 11 games in spite of Brady getting injured. Their offense was top 5 in yards. They led the league in first downs. They finished 8th in...
When you have Wes Welker and Randy Moss on the outsides for you, or in the slot, there's so much you can do. Not to mention some of the other weapons they had. But let's go.
Points per game, and they were 4th in points per drive. And they did this all with a quarterback who hadn't started a fucking organized game of football since he was in high school. Heading into the 2008 season, Matt Castle hadn't been his team's starting quarterback since 2000, when he was at Chatsworth High School in California. He played at USC for 4 years behind 2 Heisman-winning quarterbacks, Carson Palmer and Matt Leinart, and was still drafted in the 7th round in 2005. He then backed up Brady for his first 3 years in the NFL before getting the call in 2008. The fact that the Patriots could still win 11 games and put up great offensive numbers with a quarterback who hadn't played since high school is pretty damning evidence that the system they have is really fucking good. And yes, I understand that the Patriots missed the playoffs in 2008, but that was by a fluke. They won 11 games, and they're only one of 2 teams to ever miss the playoffs when winning at least 11 games. And for all the Brady fans who say, well, the year before they went 16-0, the year after they went 11-5 with Castle in 2008, with Brady back, they only won 10 games. So that logic doesn't make sense either. All of this is to say that they're...
Granted, winning 10 games, wasn't good. But, you still have to take in consideration. And at that point, man, like, Randy Moss was close to being out the door. Randy Moss was only there for 2 or 3 years. And that's because a lot of I believe, there's different speculations of why Randy Moss wanted out. The contract, or, he just didn't, I don't know, maybe he just wanted out. There were many different theories on why he wanted to leave. But at that point, Randy Moss was close to being out the door. The wide receiver weapons weren't as good. I mean, you had Jabbar Gaffney, who was starting games. Like, he was starting games. Jabbar Gaffney was starting games. Okay, the running game, New England has had some pretty questionable running. They had a pretty questionable running game after Lawrence Maroney slowly started to fade. Okay, after that, I mean, you have Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, Jonas Gray. I mean, you bouncing all over the place with running backs. Even when they got Stephen Ridley and Shane Vereen, it was inconsistent. Okay, the defense was close to being done. At that point, then you started to see the defense being ranked 20th and 15th and 17th and all this other shit because the defense wasn't stopping anybody. It's like the defense was giving up a shitload of yards, but once you get down in that red zone area, that's when they started to play better. The offensive line wasn't as good. There are plenty of reasons. During the first 3 Super Bowl wins for the Patriots, I mean, there were so many players on that team. You had Willie McGinnis, you had Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi, you had Jarvis Green, you had Richard Seymour on offensive line, you had Matt Light, you had Logan Mankins, you had Russ Hochstein, however you say his name. You have Stephen Neal. These are really solid players. Really solid players. When those players started to leave and you had to replace those players, you started to see the impact they had on the team. Okay? You started to see the impact of losing those players. I noticed that the end was near for that defense when the Super Bowl happened, and they looked old out there. They looked old and decrepit. They looked old out there. Now, they still had somewhat of a productive year the very next year. It still wasn't the same, but slowly over time, you started to notice the deterioration of the defense. So I mean, look, man. Again, you can throw the numbers out there. You can use the numbers to try to make your argument, but without context, they're not going to matter. Okay? And anybody who's watched New England games knows that after the 2007 season or whenever they played the New York Giants, that team slowly started to deteriorate in some very key positions. Some very key positions they started to deteriorate, which affected the performance of this is why they couldn't win anything for 10 years? I mean, they went to the Super Bowl in 2007. They did not go back to the Super Bowl until 2011. They haven't won a Super Bowl from 2004 to 2014. They went a long stretch without winning because slowly the key frame of that team started to disappear. It went away. And I say this about Brady, man. Brady, I think, he utilizes that system to its maximum. He does anything great that you can get out of an offense, he'll get it for you. But he can only do so much, man. The quarterback position can only do so much. This is why you hear Aaron Rodgers complaining all the fucking time, because he don't think he gets the proper, amount of support, the proper amount of weapons.
There's concrete evidence out there that Tom Brady is not very valuable, or at least not nearly as valuable as the other top quarterbacks of his generation that he's constantly considered better than. I mean, just look at how the Colts did without Peyton Manning in 2011, or how the Packers did in 2013 and 2017 when Aaron Rodgers...
Now, that Indianapolis Colts thing it's incredibly complicated, because when you talk about Aaron Rodgers and when you talk about Peyton Manning, you kind of got to throw them in the same argument as LeBron James. And what I mean by that is LeBron James, the entire system is built around him. And people call it the LeBron system, because what it is LeBron sets the tone. LeBron brings the ball up. LeBron dishes the ball. LeBron shoots the ball. LeBron attacks the rim. LeBron does everything, and it's because he wants to do everything. LeBron has it in a way where he is the team, and the team is him. And everybody else just needs to do their job. Stand by and do whatever it is they can to assist him in some way. If he passes you the ball, you make the shot. If on defense, you play defense. Okay? That is the LeBron system. Peyton had the same type of system there offensively. Peyton called his own plays. Peyton called his own audibles. I wouldn't be surprised if that whole system was designed by Peyton. So that means Peyton knows the ins and outs of that, and Peyton knows how to utilize it. When Peyton gets hurt and you bring somebody else in and they have to replace what it is that Peyton was giving you, they're going to fail. They're going to fail. Just like Aaron Rodgers, when the entire system is built around Aaron Rodgers doing what Aaron Rodgers does, when you bring somebody else in to replace that, they will fail. Now, I know some people will be like, well, Matt Flynn came in for one game and played phenomenal. That's one game. It was at the end of the season, and most teams at the end of the season, if they're not in the playoffs, or even if they are in the playoffs, they just don't give a shit as much. So they're not going to play as hard. When you have a system built around a single player, when that player gets hurt or if that player leaves, it will fail. It will fail. Okay? So let's just get that out the way. And I'm not saying Peyton Manning isn't a great quarterback. I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers wasn't a great quarterback. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying when you have a system built around one player, that player needs to be there. Otherwise, you're putting too much responsibility on a player that doesn't need that much. This is why what's going on in New England is so damn phenomenal, is that the system isn't built around Brady. And this is what, and he, bro, I'm telling you, he's the chameleon. He will change his game according to what the offense dictate him to do. That is great, man. That's you changing yourself for the success of the team. That's greatness right there. Not too many people can do that.
Got hurt. To be fair to Tom Brady, there is evidence of other all-time great quarterbacks being replaced and their teams still winning frequently. You can go back all the way to the 1960s with Johnny Unitas and how he got injured in 1968 and the team went 13-1 and his backup was named MVP. Or you could fast forward to the 80s and 90s when Joe Montana got replaced by Steve Young and Young went on to win a Super Bowl with even better stats than Montana put up. Or even looking back to this past season when the Saints were undefeated when Drew Brees went down with an injury. But this still doesn't change the fact for the last 2 decades, Tom Brady has had it better than any other quarterback in the NFL. And there are plenty of stats to prove this. How does one judge how good a quarterback has it? Well, let's look at things out of a quarterback's control. I've decided to compare Brady to the other top quarterbacks of his era, like Drew Brees, Peyton Manning.
Now this is where the video kind of, I thought the argument was kind of flimsy because he talks about field position and being able to finish with that field position and the division and the field goal kicking and a lot of things that Brady has no control over. Okay? Brady has no control over where he gets the ball. Okay? Brady only has control over how he finishes the drive. Okay? Brady doesn't have any control over what the other teams in his division are doing. Brady doesn't even have any control over what his team is doing. As far as personnel, that has been more than proven that he has no control over any of that. So now when you get to the Bills, when you get to the Jets, when you get to the Dolphins, he has no control over those teams. And I hate when people say, well, he's in the weakest division, that makes him not as good. Look at the NFC South. The Falcons, the Buccaneers, the Carolina Panthers, the Saints. That division was a joke. Because every single season, a team that was at the bottom of the division would somehow win the division. And it seemed like every year that would happen. So if the Saints finished last the previous year, they'll be the first team this year. If the Falcons was the last team this year, they'll be the first team next year. It was a joke. What about the NFC East? With the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Redskins. Besides the 2 Super Bowls that the Giants were able to win, besides the Super Bowl that the Eagles were able to get to, That division is a joke. Washington has been a joke for a while. The Cowboys have been a joke for 20 years. And the only reason why the Cowboys have been a joke was because they have had some pretty talented teams and couldn't win shit. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. That division is a joke. What about the division that Aaron Rodgers is in? Okay, the Bears was a great team, okay? But this was when Brett Favre was still the quarterback. Around the time Aaron Rodgers took over in Green Bay, Chicago was on the downslide. They started to lose whatever momentum they had. Okay? What about the Minnesota Vikings? Besides having Adrian Peterson, that team was a joke. That team was a joke. What about the Detroit Lions? Let's not even go there. Jesus. Let's not go there. Okay? What about Peyton Manning in the AFC South? The Indianapolis Colts, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans. Do I need to say any fucking more? The Jaguars have been laughable for a very long time. They just recently started to experience a little success, and now that success is over. The Houston Texans have been solid over the past few years, but around the time Peyton was tearing it up in Indy, the Houston Texans was the perennially the worst team in the AFC year after year. They were picking top 5 every fucking year. The Tennessee Titans were decent, but they were massively inconsistent. Massively. You didn't know if they were going to challenge for the division one year or end up being, a top 10 pick the next. You never knew. So we can go back and forth, about who division was worse and whose division wasn't as talented or whose division is this or whose division is that and all this other shit. But when New England fans talk about the success of their team versus other teams, they never use the division as an argument because it doesn't fucking matter. When the playoffs get there, you're not playing against your division opponents. You're playing against the best teams in the conference to get to the Super Bowl to play the best team in that conference. So at the end of the day, the argument doesn't matter about the division. Now you could say the record is bolstered by the divisional wins, but if that team wasn't as good as they are, and if Brady wasn't as good as he is in the playoffs, they would get exposed. I mean, doesn't that make sense? I'm sorry, I told you I'm a little sick. Doesn't that make sense? I feel like I'm saying as much as I can on this topic, but people are gonna have their opinions, and I respect this dude's opinion. I mean, everybody deserves to have their opinions acknowledged, but that doesn't make the opinion right. It doesn't mean that you won the fucking argument. Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I do think he gets more credit than he deserves, but that does not make him overrated. Like I said before, man, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna watch this video some more. I may come back to it at some point to comment some other stuff. But right now my head is hurting. I have a migraine. I need to drink some water, get some fucking sleep. But everybody stay safe, man. Chill out. Let's enjoy this Sunday.